Welcome to Golf Industry Guru and the Gig Podcast, where we interview the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. On today's episode, you will learn some proven real-world solutions that'll help you and your team solve some of your biggest golf business challenges. So stick around for some tips, tools, and training to get you, your people, and your business powered on. Here's your host, James Cronk.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen of Gig Nation. It is James Cronk here, your host of the Golf Industry Guru podcast, and I am so excited to have on our program today a gentleman that, wow, he just simply is like the angel from heaven above in the club industry. Kevin MacDonald is the owner of Clarity Success Coaching. He is a former club manager, but mostly he works and helps, he develops actually extraordinary leaders through his program. And Kevin knows more about the club business and more about the struggles and challenges of being a manager in the club business than I think anyone that I know. And I laugh when I look at his LinkedIn connections because I think it stopped at like 1,000 or something. And I know that Kevin knows thousands of managers around the world in the club business because he is connected. And so I can't wait to talk with my old pal. He's not old, but the relation's been long. Kevin MacDonald. And Kevin, welcome to the Gig Podcast.
James, I'm so excited about being here. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And thank you for taking the time. And I can only imagine, and this is what's so funny, Kevin, our industry is so interesting. And I know how busy you are. I know how busy I am. But, in this business, it's always like, I think, 6 degrees of separation, because this is a true story. Yesterday, I was talking to a potential new guru to come and participate, do a podcast with me. I was watching him online. I was looking at his LinkedIn stuff. I did some digging. I had a reference, and I thought, this is a cool guy, and he's an up-and-comer, and I want to have him on Golf Industry Guru. And so I contacted him. We had a conversation. We were chatting, and he says to me, well, I'm so excited. I just got off the phone. Do you know a fellow by the name of Kevin MacDonald? And yesterday, you and I both talked to Ricky Potts.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And what a total character. What a fantastic guy. And I just thought, oh, my goodness, that, our industry is so big, but at the same point in time, it's so small and it's so insular. I thought it was fascinating that you were talking to Ricky Potts about the Extraordinary Leader Program.
Yeah. And, I challenged Ricky maybe 2 months ago about connecting with people. And I said, I challenged him to connect with 10 people every day. And he, if you say to Ricky Potts, try this, he does it. Like, he's just one of those guys. He actually is somebody who's read everything I've written. And he said, I've read everything I've written. And he said, hey, I got this. I haven't even published this. You want to read that? He goes, yeah, I want to read that too. So it was, he's quite a character. And, he's a star in the business. He's and it happens to work with Troon. So we happen to have some connections there too. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, it was fascinating. It was great. For those listeners, Kevin, I know this is not true, but I tell this story anyway, because you're such a famous coach. And you're a big wig in the business. I tell people that I was your first pupil. And once again, I know that's not true, but I don't believe, because when I was a young general manager and I wanted to take over the world, someone suggested that I talk to you because you would be helpful, give me some advice and be a coach. And now I know you had started your coaching practice prior to taking me on. But I don't know for how long. And I don't think Extraordinary Leader had been invented back then, and some other, maybe not even Clarity Success Coaching. I'm not even sure. But I do tell people when someone says, that Kevin MacDonald, he's unbelievable, I say, well, I started his career. I was one of his first. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I know you certainly helped me, Kevin, and I know that I've had you certainly help some teams that I've been with before, but I wanted to start off and ask you about your transition from being a club manager into a coach, and what was it that kind of drove you or motivated you into this world, into this kind of business, and to make that change, that transition?
I'm fascinated by why people do what people do. And when I quite frankly, lost my job as a club manager at one point, I left the club and I went to another club, and I sort of knew on day 2 that I wasn't in the right spot. And so it didn't work out. And when I found myself to be unemployed, you do what's comfortable, and you go, and I applied for jobs, and I was applying for a number of jobs. And my friend John Furlong called me one day, and he says, "Kevin, you got to apply for this job in Toronto." And I said, "Well, I don't want to go to Toronto." And I grew up in Ontario, but he said, "Well, you got to apply for the job." I said, "I'm not going to apply for the job." He says, "You got to apply for the job." And I said, "John, I'm not going to apply for the job." And he said to me, he goes, "Well, I said, "I'm not going to move to Toronto." And he said, "You're not applying for the job because you want to get it. You're applying for the job because you want the headhunter who is looking for this job to know who Kevin MacDonald is." And I went, "Okay, that makes sense." And I'm on this interview with this guy, and he's asking me about my passions and my competencies. And so I told him what I loved. And the part of the club industry I loved was developing people, developing teams. That's just a part of what you do in club management, but that's the part that I loved. And then he asked me about my competencies. I told him what people had told me that I was good at doing. And he said to me, "You got to do what I do." And I said, "Well, what does that got to do with executive search consultant?" And he said, "Well, I am an executive search consultant, but I'm also an executive coach. And what you just described is what I do as a coach. You got to look into this." So that's really what opened my eyes to it. And so the part of the job part of the club industry I love the most, I get to do all day long, every day now. And that's where the magic happens for me. So that was part of the transition. Of course, I was transitioning from an employee to an entrepreneur, as you know, that transition, and it's a different ball game in many ways. So I had to work on changing me and changing how I saw things. And it's so interesting, James. I was thinking of a James story today, where when we have preconceived notions, we have programs that are running about ourselves. And I remember playing golf with you at Quilchena many, many years ago when I was still there. And we were playing. And when I got into club management, I wasn't a pro like you. I mean, I wasn't a pro, but I love golf. And somebody told me, it doesn't matter how you play golf, just don't play slow. And, so that was a program that was running for me. So I get up there and I may not play well, but man, I'm not going to hold anybody up. And I remember playing with you, and you would be whistling and look over a putt, just whistling like there's no problems in the world. And I went, "Oh, that's cool." And then you said to me, "Kevin, you don't take any practice swings. Just slow everything down and enjoy this moment and be present and play. You're a good golfer. You can play well. Just slow it down." And I went, "Isn't it interesting how just changing that mindset changes a lot of things?" And that's the job I'm in, is like you were looking at me from the outside, not seeing what I wasn't seeing it from the inside. And that's what I get to do on a daily basis with people, always with the intent and the desire to bring out their best and bring out their genius. So that's what I love.
And Kevin, when you started coaching, and because I think I know the answer, but I'm not 100% sure I know the answer. Would it be fair to say that there wasn't like you didn't have 20 competitors I know now you work all over the world. You certainly work in the United States a lot with the CMAA, which I'll ask you about in a second. But coaching and really improving yourself and asking others, or even, hey, asking for help. Like in the time when you kind of started doing that, there must have been some challenges just in getting other club managers to ask for help, right? Or to want to go on that journey. Would that not be true? Or is that how was it back then when you started coaching?
Yeah, well, when I started coaching, I was 2000, so 21 years ago, I started coaching. And the coaching sort of industry or discipline in that sense, not the people, if I told somebody then I was a coach, they say, what, volleyball, hockey, what are you coaching? And, but in the terms of personal growth and development and leadership as a profession, it was only about 5 years old. And so, and I also found a big difference in Canada and the United States is that there was a lot more appetite for it in the United States in terms of being open to it, where in Canada, people were more reluctant, I think, to take that on. And because, hey, we're independent. We've been taught as men, mostly in a male-dominated industry at the time, that we shouldn't need help. We should have all this. But I'm telling you, I think most club managers know that they're responsible for so many things that to know it all or to have all the pieces doesn't make sense. So they're willing to ask for help. And, if I can help them achieve their goals quicker or achieve them in a more powerful or long-lasting way, then it's well worth it. And so now, like I was thinking of the starting of it with CMAA was that I was asked if I could coach 7,000 people. And at the time, I had no idea how I would do that. And in the beginning, really what it meant for people in the beginning before we were able to educate them was that people who had lost their job, I was it. So CMA didn't have a lot for unemployed people, but if you lost your job, spend time with Kevin and then get ready for the next job. And my job wasn't to just get them ready to get a job, but really sort of help them understand the accountability of why they lost their job, reframe it, and then make sure that they were getting the right job and not just jumping from one job to another sort of thing. So that was the beginning of that relationship, and to have that opportunity, to have that platform, and as CMA has been incredible, using me over the years, but it changes the education. And now I'd say probably 15 to 20% of the people I coach are in transition, as opposed, now it's not something you do after you lose your job. Now it's something you do so you don't lose your job and so that you can live a great life.
While we're on the topic, I read somewhere at some point, and I don't know if the stat is still correct, but it was talking about, the average tenure of a club manager, in the United States or North America is under 3 years or something. Now, like many, I know lots of managers that have been around a club for 20 years, and Greg Patterson, 35 years, and other managers that are lucky to make 3.5 months. But in your experience, Kevin, I have a couple of questions for you. Number one is, do you know what that statistic is? And then number two is, no matter what the answer is, why is it that happens? Like why do you think it's difficult, or why do you think there's such transition? Maybe you don't think that, I don't know. But let's start with the question number one. Do you think it's a short window of the average tenure of club managers in general in the United States or in Canada, North America, or elsewhere?
Yeah, I think that number is probably fairly realistic, under 3 years. Obviously, when things like COVID or in 2008, when the economy, those things skew it.
Of course.
But yeah, and I don't always think it's a bad thing.
No, that's my next question.
In fact, I think sometimes there's a lot of people who, and stay too long and aren't, maybe a lot of people design into their career that they're going to be there for a certain number of years and then move on to another one and get different types of experience. And then there's a lot of people that are moving up to bigger clubs, and that's part of their process. So as much as it sounds great to be at a club for 25 years, that is great if it's the right club. And I think that's really the essence of it, is that it's not about finding a club or, I went to a prestigious club that I wasn't a fit for, or it wasn't a fit for me. And, it looked great from the outside. And I think that's what happens sometimes, is that we have a dream of something that we have a romantic idea about it. But when you're working with a coach and you get really clear on what you need, what your values are, and then you can really find that place that's in alignment, that is going to make you work. And, I think back to one of my first clients was Jim, mm-hmm. and our friend Jim. And, he knew what he was not. Mm-hmm. And there was a local club that wanted him very badly. And, he wanted me to talk to them to say he's not the guy. Because he couldn't be him. He couldn't be authentically him there. Yes. And he knew it. And so a lot of us don't know that. A lot of us, go to the place where I think some people have gone to that place where they're not the right fit. They would love it if they were. And, sometimes they're even in it when they're not a good fit, and it doesn't help their career or their family or their well-being to be in the wrong place.
Well, and I think by the way, we're talking about Jim McLaughlin, who now is one of our gurus, but also a vice president of Troon, and the consulting arm now of Troon. He's been with Troon for many, many years. My mentor and just an unbelievable, brilliant man in the world of golf, and especially when it comes to understanding people and teams and culture and branding and things like that. And you're right. And about the fact of what Jim is good and not good at. And I got to tell you, Jim was my mentor, Kevin. And what I learned from Jim was that there were some jobs I could never do. Like I should never be allowed to apply for a job at a private club because I'd last a day. I swear to goodness, if I was lucky, I'd last a day. Now, bring me in as a consultant, and I love working with boards and with private clubs because I have a different role. I have a different task. I was just talking with a potential client this morning about helping their board go through a strategic planning process, and she kind of said, "What makes you different from the other consultants that do that work?" And I said, because I know that your problems at your club are your own, and they're within those four walls. There's no cookie cutter solution that you can just apply to a club and say, do this and everything's going to be fine, because our club is at a core about people. And you have to understand the people, their motivations, their disappointments, their wants, their wishes, their desire to have a COO or the desire to have a boy or girl do their bidding, whatever it is in the business. It's so fascinating. So Kevin, when you work with a manager, and we're going to get into extraordinary leader and some other things in a second, but as you've gone 21 years now, what are some of the things that you think are true to being successful in the club business for those people you work with that are transitioning or going through those struggles, or when you say they have to look at themselves? There must be some traits, obviously, that, as I just mentioned, some that I don't have, but what are some traits that you think are needed to be successful? And we can talk about the public and the private side, but right now let's talk about the private side.
Well, I think you need to know who you are, and again, back to that thing that coach said to me, what are your passions and your competencies? But like, for instance, if you're a very entrepreneurial person who's dynamic and has 20 ideas a day, that may or may not work well unless it's a very special private club, because with a traditional board of directors, it would be way too slow. I've often said that I used to think that a board of directors could make a decision in 3 months that I could make in 5 minutes, and because I was more unencumbered by worrying about what every member was going to say to them in the locker room, if it was a good idea or a bad idea. Mm-hmm. And so when you don't trust that you can just make those decisions, you as an entrepreneur, or you in the types of clubs you've run, or you can make those decisions, you can see where you can maneuver fairly quickly. And that's a difference. Knowing that, is a good thing. Just, how do I operate? Is it a fit? Is it going to work at this place? But, I think when I'm talking to people, that idea of self-awareness is just get to know. If you are coaching a hockey team or a football team or a baseball team, you have to know your players. You have to know how they play together. You have to know they know their positions and where they're good and where they're not good, their strengths and weaknesses. And you certainly have to be able to do that with yourself. And oftentimes we're just so used to operating the way we always have, so we don't really want to look at ourselves and change, because there's a fear about that, and it's not easy sometimes. And it's, why should I? I'm working. It's fine. Now, we have a great story that one of our masters on our extraordinary leader calls that we have. And you've been one of them, by the way. Thank you. But he was a CEO at a large company, and he said in his career he was a real boss hole. And, in other words, he didn't care about his people. He cared about results, and he would steamroll people, and he would run over people, and he'd beat up people. And then he got cancer, and he came back, and after his cancer, he really changed the way he operated. And he was really caring about people and their development and their families and all that stuff. And he said, the problem with being a boss hole was that it worked. Is that he was a boss hole and he got great results being a boss hole, so therefore I should be a boss hole because it works. But then he said, when I stopped being one, I got way better results. But the problem was I got good results when I was a boss hole. And I think that's where we are sometimes, is that, we think if it works for us, then it works. And sometimes it does, and maybe it could work better. But I think sometimes having somebody from the outside sort of hold up that mirror and sort of give you some other way to reframe it a little bit, it helps to change and get the best of you instead of what has been working for you.
Do you find that there's some characteristics of people that come to you, whether through your programs or just, for advice, and not the assigned kind of, I just lost my job, and so the CMA is going to guide you to. For the people that do you find that there's some consistencies in the reasons why they come looking or they come chatting?
Yeah, I said at the beginning that I was asked to coach 7,000 people, and the truth is 7,000 people don't want to be coached. So probably of any group of people, probably 5%, 2 to 5%, so 2 to 5% of 7,000 is still a pretty good number. But I'm fascinated that we coach the people who are at the top of the game. And I assume in golf or in any profession, the ones that are always at the top of the game are always the ones that want to be a little bit better. They want to get something that's an edge. They want to develop themselves. And the people in the middle or at the bottom don't really need it. They're fine.
It's unbelievable to me. We've launched Golf Industry Guru, and it's a training platform that's very affordable, obviously. And I thought the first 40 clubs you're going to join were like the clubs that had no training. There was 6 people behind the table, that they were like, what's a job description? And no, the first 40 clubs that joined are all like, they're like the, clubs. I'm just like, oh my God, you're joining? Like, that's fantastic. Yeah. But I guess it's the same when you go to the conference. When you go to an education conference, the people that are in the room that are taking the notes, they're all the peers and leaders of the industry. And I'm thinking to myself, why is that other guy not here? Or that other, she should really be here. She needs some help, for goodness sakes, or he, so I'm sure that's, I guess, no different in your work from a coaching standpoint. It's like the best want to get better, and people that recognize that it's a journey. And that we can all get better. Like we can all get better, for goodness sakes, no matter how good we are.
Well, we've been interviewing people since 2007 on our program, and we have this common statement. We say that of all the people we've interviewed, you being one of them, none of them have arrived. like we haven't had anybody come on and go, "Hey, I'm the greatest. You have to be like me." They're all learning. They're all developing. They're all. They may be confident, but they all have a humility. They're all going, hey, this is what I can tell you what works for me, and that may work for you. But there hasn't been an arrogance in it, and I always amazed, like John Furlong, we've had 3 times, ran the Olympic Games. It's just like this humility, and did something pretty extraordinary. But it was his people. It wasn't him. It was his people. And you get that a lot. And that's the kind of people that are sort of attracted to the coaching space.
So can you tell us a little bit, Kevin, about Extraordinary Leader? And if you don't mind, because I know I've had people come up to me after I've given a presentation all across places, especially in Canada. And they'll come up to me and say, hey, and there'll be a young, often they're a young up and comer, and they're the ones that come afterwards and say, can I send me your presentation? Or, I want to tell you about what I'm doing. And lots of times, Kevin, they say, oh, you know Kevin MacDonald, I'm taking his Extraordinary Leader program. And I think to myself, that kid's going to make it, that kid is on the right path. And so tell our listeners a little bit about how the Extraordinary Leader program, I guess, works, or really kind of how do you engage, and what kind of people do you look to take that program or to connect with? I mean, obviously, like me, I choose my clients. I choose, if I meet a club manager or a board and I don't think that they have any interest in making improvements, then I don't take their money because I don't want to fail. And if I fail with that client or with that club, then that's going to look bad on my resume. And so the first thing I always say is you might be hiring me, but I'm actually hiring you. It works, even though, the money's going in one direction, but it works both ways. So how do you approach that from your program? And tell me about, I know Shelley and everything and what you guys do. I don't want the listeners to know, if they don't already know, how that works.
Sure. Well, Shelley McDougall worked at the Glencoe Club, which was one of my biggest clients in the beginning. And I coached her, and I told her, I said, one day we will work together, I hope. And in 2006, she left the Glencoe. And so it's been, 15 years that we've been working together now. But she joined me to help coach people in CMAA. And at one point we came to the conclusion that as much as we're privileged to help people who have lost their job, we want to create it so that they don't lose their job. And one of the things we found was that even the GMs, a lot of the clubs in Canada and the United States have got a background of training. I mean, they get exposed to CSCM, CMA training, and yet they all have leaders, in their clubs, at whether it's food and beverage managers or housekeeping managers or maintenance managers or pros or superintendents, whatever, that may have less than they do leadership skill. And they've often been people who have come up through the ranks, have been very competent, great waiter, was a supervisor, and all of a sudden they're assistant food and beverage manager, but they never were really given solid leadership training and understanding. So we thought if we could create something that gave all those GMs a lot more security, because they had a team of people that had the skills, because they don't fire the team, they fire the manager oftentimes. So we wanted to make that, and we wanted to make it very affordable for clubs to do that, whether it was a big club or whether it was small mid-America or mid-Canada club. We wanted it to be very affordable. So we created an environment, and that was the learning system. The way we looked at it was, we based it on people forget what they hear. Or what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. So it was very much taking it from your head to your heart to your hand sort of thing, and making it experiential. So whatever we were training, it was something that they had to do something with. There had to be some action taken. And so as we created the program, we came up with 12 modules, a 1 year program, 12 things about leadership. And we have 2 lessons each month, and people can get their CMA or CSCM credits by attending our program. But the first lesson was always about you, always about you, the leader. Like if we were talking about vision, the first lesson would be about your personal vision for you, your life, your career. But we wanted to teach you how to become visionary. The second lesson would be about creating and articulating a vision for your team, your people, your organization, and so that you could get them to go with you. And then the third call of the month, we bring in some visionary leader. And, in addition to that, we have coaching gyms and forums and mastermind groups that people can join. But the key to it was just lead thyself. So if you're going to work on being a great leader, you got to be great James Cronk. I mean, you work on your gifts, your genius, and we're not coming from a brokenness, or it's not like we're here to fix your problems. We're here to illuminate your genius. And in our logo, it says the learning. It's a door opening, and it says the learning is on the inside. So it was the idea that I'm not going to change. I'm not going to teach James things that are going to, I'm going to teach you some things, but the real beauty is when you take what you already know and you do it, because it's one thing to have the knowledge, another thing to practice the practice. And so that's what we created. We have clubs from all over North America. We have people at every level of club management. We love this saying that, your birth certificate is irrelevant. Your ethnicity is irrelevant. Your position is irrelevant. If you want to have a great life and you want to be a great leader, then come on in. And it's extraordinary how you learn. Part of it is if you come into our program, you're going to get a lot out of it, but you're going to give a lot because we expect your extraordinary to make us better. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the magic of it. And so it's been amazing to see who's gone through it. And, we have a extraordinary leader pin, which is a red exclamation mark. And you go to CMA conference and you see how many people are wearing the pin. That's sort of the secret code that they're part of the community. But it's been wonderful over the years. And most, I've been looking at the people at the front, in the front podium, all the board of directors of CMA, and I can see all the red pins.
That's awesome.
Because the people, I think there's 27 now, maybe master certified club managers, and I think we've coached most of them. So it's been gratifying, and it's an amazing program. And thank you for asking me to talk about it. I appreciate that.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And for Golf Industry Guru, if you join our program, you have to shave your head and be bald.
Oh, well, hey, I'm close.
So maybe that's a little bit too extreme. Maybe I should think about the pin idea.
I see Scotty didn't.
Do you have a case study, Kevin, you could share with us? Do you have an example of someone that, you really feel like kind of blossomed or transitioned, or would you put someone on the bottom of your testimonial? Is there an example that you could share that you think would be our listeners would like? No names are required.
Well, I was going to give names, but I'll protect the innocent, I guess. But yeah, we have some poster children. I think that people who have radically changed their world and their life and their leadership. I think of somebody that is in our program from Gulf, Ontario, in Canada, and person that was a receptionist with Gulf, Ontario, and became this extraordinary leader, and is so committed to our program, and is now taking on a first tee for Ontario and working with Golf Canada and Golf Ontario. So she's amazing. But there's some young. I'm impressed when we see some of the youth, some of the young people that come in our program and blow people's minds. Like a fellow named Kyle Ruck in Chicago we had him as a master one time because I was at a club in Dallas, and somebody said that they had these interns at Dallas they were supposed to teach leadership to, and they said that this young man taught them more about leadership than they could teach him. And so we had Kyle on as a young man who had been a Marine, served in Iraq, and so I did 2 tours of duty. And the day we interviewed him was his first day as an assistant manager at one of the clubhouses at Desert Mountain. So people would say, well, why would you have the master be somebody who's an assistant manager on their first day? But because the way he lived his life, the way his philosophies, the way he approached everything he did. One quick story is he had a sign that said "Complacency kills," and it was the sign that we had on our invitation for the call. And he said every day his job he was the leader of a supply unit in Iraq, and so he would have a big machine gun on a Jeep, and there'd be trucks would be going behind him, and if there was any problems, he was the first to encounter the problems. And he said every day when we left the camp, there was a sign that said "Complacency kills." And he said every sign, that was the last thing we saw before we left the camp. And he said when people are shooting at you every day and trying to blow you up every day, you are very alert. But on the day when you go 5 or 6 days or a week without anybody shooting at you, then the guys start putting the earbuds in their ears, and that's when people get killed. And he said that for him was important in war, but at a club, complacency kills. With your relationships, complacency kills. With training and developing people, complacency kills. And so here's at the time, 26-year-old or something that, people are just going, wow, it's so wise, so simple. And, I think when we're willing to learn from each other, it's amazing what happens.
That's fantastic. I love that, Kevin. Thank you so much. What a great story and a great example. And I'm gonna invite you back for another podcast, because I would like to ask you about some of the things that some lessons that you think that every manager needs to know about being successful in their role and their job. You've obviously worked with and talked to so many successful and challenged managers, and I would love to get your thoughts on that. But I want to thank you for telling us about the Extraordinary Leader Program. I know that I'm sure they can reach you by LinkedIn. They can reach you by your website, by Clarity Success Coaching, by the Extraordinary Leader Program, by emailing you.
www.thecoachingdept.com is our website for the Extraordinary Leader Program. The coaching, short form for department.com.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Kevin, thank you so much for joining our Golf Industry Guru podcast today and for sharing with us the benefits and value of coaching. And I invite all the listeners to consider participating in your fantastic program, because all you need to do is to look at those people wearing those red pins, and you'll know that you want to follow in their footsteps. So that's awesome. So thanks so much, Kevin, for your time today.
Thank you, James. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Gig Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and mostly that you learned a few things that will help you improve your business. Join us next time as we continue to bring you the best and brightest golf and hospitality leaders on the planet. Thanks for listening.